Welcome. Today we're going to do basically a repaint of an old painting of mine. I picked it primarily because it's got real strong values. We're going to expand the concept from just the clouds and sky down into the landmass and water. But again, what we're really working for here is just getting the shapes and values right. If we do that, the picture will work. Let's first of all get the paper wet. Now this is Arches, which is a French paper. Arches 300-pound rough. And the reason why I choose that for this is really plein air painting. This is what's going to happen when you're out in the field. In the studio, I tend to use Saunders Waterford, an English paper, and 140 pound. It's a little more reflective, and I'm able to get a little more subtle colors and values, but I have time in the studio. When you're out in the field, you don't really have a lot of time. So I'm putting down the paper's wet, and I'm putting down just a very thin wash of cad red. And then I'm going to add to it. The cad red is a nice base color because it's warm and it allows me, it won't really affect any other color. So this is a nice dark blue. And let's just block it in. We're just making the sky. There we go. Softening some of these edges a bit. All right. Now let's go ahead and move over here and put some shadow area in. For that, I'm going to add a little bit of this violet and a touch of that Windsor green and some of this red that I used. So now we have kind of a three-color mix, and we'll just block that in. Now what this represents are shadows that exist in this cloud mass. Down in here, I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna to this mixture and warm it up a touch. And then we'll put that down in there. And as we get closer to the horizon, things warm up, cool above and warm down below. That's how it would be in the real world. The sky, the sky is reflecting warmer temperatures down close to the horizon, cooler temperatures above. Now let's just, while this is still wet, let's just block this in real fast, this big landmass. Now let's let that wait for just a second. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to add just a bit more to the shadows and the clouds, and then I'm going to lay this in real fast so we can take advantage of it being relatively wet. Now, stroke pattern. I'm trying to make the strokes appear fairly random. So there's a tendency when we paint to kind of get into this repetitive or reciprocal process. The problem is that's going to end up looking manufactured in the picture. It just looks like somebody's doing it rather than how the real world would look in terms of the interaction of these various aspects. I'm going to go ahead and put in a little darker sky here. So we're getting, again, a dark purplish color for our sky. And we just block it in. Keep the strokes loose. And then you can sort of play with the edges there to create the edge of a cloud. Yeah. The paper is very forgiving. You're able to adjust things as you go as long as it's fairly damp. You can keep adding to it and creating more and more of dark value, and it'll all just blend in together. Now it's fairly cloudy or foggy today, and so it's actually perfect painting weather, because if I were painting in direct sun, this would all be drying pretty fast. It would be causing me a lot of problems. So when you see the clouds or you see the fog, I find it's actually to your benefit. You can always make things bright in terms of painting it, but if you're painting in direct sun, it tends to make it very difficult to judge values. Now you can take an umbrella, but that really that makes the whole process a lot more involved, because you have to tote all this stuff around. I'd rather just go ahead and paint. Another thing, when you're looking for subjects to paint or where to position yourself where it's the most comfortable for you to paint. In other words, you can always adjust what you're looking at to make a picture. You don't have to paint exactly what you're looking at. The thing is, when you're set up somewhere, if you're not aware of where the sun's going to be or wind and things like that, it's going to come up exactly when you start in the most crucial part of your painting, where you really have to bear down, and it's very difficult. So find places to paint, like a gazebo, something that's a little covered, where you can set up and you've got water and bathrooms or whatever it is you need, and it's fairly accessible. Don't get out on a point of a cliff or something. It may be a great view, but it might not be a very good place to paint. Okay, so let's do, as promised, this big landmass coming in. So what I'm going to do is take a simple mixture of, let's take some of this raw umber and a little bit of that Windsor blue, and that gives me a warmish green. Looks pretty good. I'm going to take just a touch of red, and that'll just sort of neutralize it, give it a kind of flat grayish quality. There we go. That looks pretty good. All right. So let's just lay it in real fast. Now it appears very dark when it's hitting the paper here, but you'll find that as it dries, it will end up looking a lot lighter. There we go. Stray hair. Now I'm just kind of crisscrossing my strokes here to cover some area and get away from looking like I'm making repetitive stroke patterns. And we'll just start letting that dry. And coming down here to the front, we're going to make some lighter value shapes, actually shadow shapes, and letting the paper itself act as the light part of the rocks. There's a little bit of burnt umber. Got the brush on the side. Use the brush any which way you need to. It's designed to be worked in all different ways. It's not just like that, sideways, whatever. This is just a simple spatula or palette knife, as they call. You see I've got a fairly wide blade there. Now what I use with it, I very rarely use it to mix paints. Usually what I do is just take the blade edge and get myself a little bit of white paper back. See? But that will allow us to have a bit of break. There we go. Just a bit of yellow ochre, and we'll just drop that into some of those open area places. All right, good. Spray bottle. Just going to knock that off. I want to keep this area down here pretty light, because that's going to be ocean washing up and foam and things like that. So we're going to work to keep our white down in here, your white paper open. Now, I'm finding this a little dull. So here's your paper towel. So I'm just going to come up on the edge here. Look how that creates a bit of texture. Yellow ochre and a touch of burnt umber, and then a little bit of blue. And that gives us a grayish, warm, yellowish color. And we'll just go ahead and block this in. There we go. Now we're going to do another. This is one little point of rock coming out here into the water. So now let's do this one down below. This time we're going to take the same basic mixture, but we're going to add a touch of sort of a blue to make it a little darker. And we'll put that in there. Leaving little open spaces. There we go. Now let's see. There we go. And then down below, we'll go back to a lighter value. I'm going to use predominantly raw sienna here because as we're coming back close, it gets warmer. So look how even just the use of a warmer yellow creates a sense of warm fading to cool depth. All right. I'm going to pull some of this out. I'm going to go back up in here and not happy with this area in here, so let's quinacridone gold, Windsor blue, green with a touch of cad red to basically neutralize it so it's not too screaming. Green is a very dominating color, so you want to always keep it grayed. If you use green out of the tube, it just doesn't work. Your painting just goes right down because that's all anybody can see is the green. There, that's better. I'm liking that. So I'm going to just spritz it to get a little bit of dampness down on the paper. Just kind of wet that down. There we go. A little bit of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue gives me a very rich gray, warm, rich gray, dark. See, that's when you become familiar enough with these colors and you use them enough, you don't even think of them as their names. You just think warm, rich, dark, and you know what colors make that up. So just going to put some of this warm, rich, dark down in there. And there we go. Yeah. And let's work it up in here. I'm going to add some blue to cool it down and push it back a bit. Blue is cool, and it's going to take whatever color you're working with and make it cooler and push that mass back. Now I see this little bit in here that's kind of iridescent looking, so I'm going to leave that and see what I can do with it. Maybe it'll work, maybe not. I can always cover it up later. But sometimes little things happen, and if you just kind of leave them alone, at the end of the day, they end up looking pretty good. Just trying to create a sense of some foam washing up on the areas here. Burnt umber, some blue, adding some red to this mixture to gray it. And I'm just going to work it forward. It's working, hopefully. Yeah. All right, let's get some water in here. Start out with some cobalt blue. And then we'll mix that with some of this gray we've made up to gray it down a bit. Now there's breakers in the back here, so I'm just going to put in a sort of graded wash coming down here. Quinacridone gold, Windsor blue, green, gray it down a touch and lay it in here. Let's just let that sit for a minute. I'm going to work these rocks in here. Now I'm just kind of fishing around with some greens and these earth colors to get a dark. All right. Adding some raw umber. At this point, I usually like to pull out a hand mirror and regard myself looking good. Actually, I'm just kidding. What I do is I take the hand mirror and I look at the picture in the mirror. And what that does is it shows me, sometimes when we're painting, we get very caught up in what we're looking at that we can't see the forest for the trees. So this allows me to take a different view of it from a different perspective. And usually the first thing that comes through is where the picture is weak. And so right now, this is strong, sky's good, that landmass coming down is good. Right in here, we need to really define that. Idea being that water and rocks are meeting. So let's go out here to the tip of this rock and push that out into the water. Sun's coming out. Is it problematic that I'm not talking right now?
No.
Okay, cool. In a big wash and see what it looks like, and if it looks decent enough, we'll call it done. And then we'll talk about how do you know when to stop. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of wet down this area in here, so when I hit it with the paint, it isn't going to just bite right in. So far, this is working relatively. Again, it's really dark and light, dark light, dark light. I might go in and do a few things once the water's in. Here's the palette knife. I can create some texture. Just adding a bit of water here and there so those edges aren't so hard. Just let it dry. Cerulean, cobalt, cad red, gray blue. This is what's called adjusting. You're just trying to adjust things, their relationships to each other, to make it work a little better. Here we go. This is basically, I'm not going to fuss anymore with it. It's just a feeling, it's just an impression. Don't ask any more if you're painting. As long as there's a feeling coming out of it, you're doing good work. And just keep working. It seems like, you know, you're painting and it doesn't seem like you're getting any better. Sometimes it seems like you're getting worse. And then if you paint every day, even for just 20 minutes or so, that day will come, you'll do a great painting and you're off to the races. And then, you know, you'll go back into the plateau thing. But as long as those days happen where you paint and you really get, you know, turned on by what you're doing, that's what it's about. So thank you.